I want you to imagine for a moment the sheer scale of human suffering we're about to explore. 12 million souls torn from home. This is the Atlantic slave trade. It's a dark chapter in human history that spans centuries and continents, leaving an indelible mark on our world. The story of the Atlantic slave trade begins in 1444, when Portuguese ships first arrived on the West African coast. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a random occurrence. It was the result of years of exploration, driven by Europe's insatiable appetite for goods and labor. These early Portuguese voyages marked the beginning of a brutal era that would last for over 4 centuries. By 1500, approximately 81,000 enslaved Africans had been transported to Europe and nearby Atlantic islands, marking the beginning of a devastating trend. Now you might be wondering what happened after people were captured and sold into slavery? The answer is the Middle Passage, a journey so horrific that it defies imagination. Captives were packed into the holds of ships like cargo, chained together in spaces so tight they could barely move. On average, each slave had only 20 inches of vertical space and less than 6 square feet of floor space. Let's listen to the words of Olaudah Equiano, who survived this ordeal. Let's break this down into numbers because the scale of the Atlantic slave trade is almost incomprehensible. From 1525 to 1866, approximately 12.5 million Africans were forcibly transported across the Atlantic. That's more than the entire population of many countries today. Of these, about 10.7 million survived the Middle Passage. But here's the truly horrifying part. Up to 20% of those enslaved didn't even survive the journey. That means for every 5 people torn from their homes and families, 1 would die before even reaching the shores of the Americas. These aren't just statistics. Each number represents a human life, a story cut short, a family destroyed. Upon reaching the Americas, those who survived faced another horror, the auction block. In places like Charleston and Kingston, human beings were displayed, examined, and sold like livestock. Families that had managed to stay together through the horrors of the Middle Passage were often separated forever. In the United States alone, it's estimated that more than 1 million enslaved people were sold from the Upper South to the Lower South between 1790 and 1860. This was the reality for millions of people, a trauma that echoed through generations. The Atlantic slave trade wasn't just a series of individual crimes. It was a vast economic system known as the triangular trade. European ships would sail to Africa with manufactured goods, which they would exchange for enslaved people. These ships would then cross the Atlantic to the Americas, where they would sell the enslaved Africans and buy raw materials like sugar, tobacco, and cotton. By the 19th century, the British port of Liverpool, a key player in the slave trade, was handling 40% of world trade, but the cost in human suffering was incalculable. Despite the overwhelming odds against them, enslaved Africans never stopped resisting. There were numerous revolts on ships and plantations. One of the most infamous incidents was the Zong Massacre of 1781, where the crew of a slave ship threw 132 enslaved Africans overboard to claim insurance money. People like Olaudah Equiano, Frederick Douglass, and Harriet Tubman fought tirelessly against the system of slavery. Their courage and persistence in the face of overwhelming odds is a testament to the human spirit. Tubman alone led about 70 enslaved people to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Among the many voices that have come down to us from this dark period, Olaudah Equiano's story stands out. Kidnapped as a child and sold into slavery, Equiano eventually purchased his own freedom and became a key figure in the abolitionist movement. Equiano wrote, "I now wished for the last friend, death, to relieve me. But soon, to my grief, 2 of the white men offered me eatables, and, on my refusing to eat, one of them held me fast by the hands, and laid me across, I think, the windlass and tied my feet, while the other flogged me severely." His words remind us that behind every statistic, every historical fact about the slave trade, there was a human being with hopes, fears, and dreams. The fight to end the Atlantic slave trade was long and difficult. In 1807, the British Parliament passed the Slave Trade Act, prohibiting the slave trade in the British Empire. The Royal Navy's West Africa Squadron captured 1,600 slave ships and freed 150,000 Africans between 1808 and 1860. In the United States, the fight against slavery led to the Civil War. This culminated in the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and the 13th Amendment in 1865. Brazil was the last Western country to abolish slavery, only doing so in 1888. The wealth generated by slave labor helped fuel the Industrial Revolution and laid the foundation for modern capitalism. At the same time, it created deep-rooted inequalities that persist to this day. Forms of slavery continue to exist in the modern world, with an estimated 40 million people trapped in forced labor and human trafficking. A 2016 study found that the average wealth of white families in the U.S. was 7 times higher than that of black families. The fight for human dignity and freedom is far from over. As we conclude this journey through one of history's darkest chapters, it's crucial to remember why we study this history. It's not just about knowing what happened, but understanding how it happened and ensuring it never happens again. The Atlantic slave trade shows us the depths of human cruelty, but also the heights of human resilience and the power of collective action for change. The story of the Atlantic slave trade isn't just a history lesson, it's a call to action. It reminds us to be vigilant against all forms of exploitation and dehumanization. We must continue to fight for a world where every person's dignity and freedom are respected. As we've journeyed through the history of the Atlantic slave trade, we've encountered stories of unimaginable cruelty, but also of incredible resilience and the triumph of the human spirit. Which of these stories moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video informative, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon for more historical deep dives. Remember, understanding our past is crucial to shaping a better future.